evening to you and welcome back to Checkpoint here on KTN News. We are delighted to have your company with us this evening. We are focusing on prosecuting graft. A lot has been said. We've seen many developments in the recent past in as far as that anti-corruption campaign is concerned. And tonight I'm speaking with a man who once served as the country's Director of Public Prosecutions. His name is Philip Murgor. And before we went on break, sir, I touched on just some of the matters you were looking at then. That to date we've not seen closure. And what your thoughts are, Anglo leasing, golden bag, over a decade. And here we are with unanswered questions, not quite accountability in as far as convictions on those issues. So that why should Kenyans look forward to much in these instances?
Sophia, there's quite a few differences in the situation that we have today. During the time when I was DPP, I had no security of tenure. The public prosecutor was the Attorney General. The Attorney General had been there a long time, so really we're talking about the failure of that office headed by the then Attorney General Amos Wako for an extended period to bring these two great crimes to closure. I came in for a very short period, 2 very exciting, extremely stormy 2 years. I did my best. I was prosecuting Anglo leasing from the front, personally. I was trying to get to the bottom of Goldenberg personally before I was run out of town. The difference today, and of course I should mention political will. Under the NARC or Kibaki administration, the political will lasted 12 months. And the second 12 months, some of us who are at the forefront of fighting, of handling anti-corruption issues, including John Gidongo and myself, suddenly became the enemies within. And people started whispering as soon as we entered a room. And, John Gidongo went into exile, and it was only a matter of time before I was thrown out of office. Kibaki went completely silent and disappeared. And so there was no political cover. Today, I'm not talking about the last 5 years, because the last 5 years, I must say that Uhuru Kenyatta was missing as well in this important issue of the fight against corruption.
Right.
But today, there is every indication that Uhuru Kenyatta is completely committed to this fight. And it therefore makes the work of the DPP extremely much easier. When I say much easier, I mean he has political support from the highest office in the land. When I was DPP, at some point I made a very difficult decision involving the prosecution of policemen. And within a day or two, I had what looked like policemen come to my house at 8 o'clock, trailing after my official car, and engage in a shootout at my gate with the policeman guarding me. And the policeman guarding me was saying that all indications were that these were policemen.
Their colleagues.
Their colleagues. Today, I have read, and I have no reason to doubt it, that Mr. Nuruddin Haji has been provided all the personal security that will enable him function with the necessary security and peace of mind.
Right.
So there's a world of difference. There's a world of
between that
difference.
time and then. But at the end of your tenure and before the next DPP took office, you attended a vetting session. You appeared before Parliament, and I want us to listen to a clip and what you had to say about the man who was the former DPP, immediate former DPP, that's Keriako Tobiko. This is what Philip Murgor said about him during his consideration for that post.
If it happens to be Mr. Keriako Tobiko, you might as well consider that the Anglo leasing prosecutions will end without having been prosecuted.
And that was a prophecy, in your view, looking back, that you did not think he was fit. You felt if he became DPP, which he did, that the matters that you were dealing with would not amount to much at the end of the day.
Sophia, prophecy is a nice word to use today, but It didn't have to be a prophecy. It was so obvious that Mr. Tobiko would not be able to handle the Anglo leasing case because of conflict of interest. He used to be the defense counsel in the Anglo leasing cases. But it was worse than that. When a country is said to be very corrupt, or the corruption is out of control, of course there is political responsibility on the part of the president and so on. But the office that fails in the fight against corruption, the office that fails the country, is the office of DPP. So I wasn't surprised that in the last 5 years, the country moved, with Mr. Tobiko as DPP, the country moved to being considered perhaps the most corrupt on the continent, because that office wasn't functioning. So I live in hope. I don't feel the same way about Mr. Nuruddin Haji. I have watched his pronouncements. I have read about him. I have met him. And he's a believer. He believes in what he's doing. That's the first thing that it takes.
Yeah.
The person in that office must believe that he has a job to do, and the only scorecard is prosecuting effectively to conclusion in order to bring down corruption in the public service.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that in terms of capacity, in terms of experience of the lawyers, the investigators. Corruption also is an issue within some of these agencies. But you mentioned that the president has showed political will, which is good for the DPP. However, again, in recent weeks, we've seen some of the politicians come out to say this is targeted at their man, and citing the deputy president. I wonder what you make of those kind of sentiments.
I expect politicians to be politicians, and politicians will always politicize something. So I don't expect anything less from them. I personally, as DPP, handled a prosecution which involved Mr. William Ruto as an accused person when I was DPP. And it was, similarly politicized. But I also handled cases involving other people and some politicians, and it was always the same. I think the office of the DPP should focus on its mandate, which is prosecuting crime, prosecuting corruption, and let the politicians do what they do best, when they do it. If you focus on that,
you'll be derailed.
You'll be derailed.
There also has been debate around, we've seen arrests take place on Fridays, Saturday morning, bright and early, or late in the night. Seeing even a governor in one instance spend a night or two behind bars, PSs as well. And so the debate has been, there are those who argue the right to bail, and that when this arrest takes place in that kind of an environment, to force a night or two to be spent behind bars, it goes against that right. They were calling it Kamata weekends or Fridays. I wonder your thoughts on this.
What I think, Sophia, I think bail is given out on very easy terms these days. To the extent that somebody charged with stealing billions or hundreds of millions is in fact in a hurry to go to court so that they get a bail of 5 million shillings or 1 million shillings and they walk out. All over the world, when you're charged with a serious crime, the bail terms should be commensurate with the crime you have committed. So if you're charged with stealing a few billion shillings, your bail terms should be equally or, high to the extent that when you get that bail, you are not a flight risk. So let me make it very clear that I come from the old school, where if you were charged with grand corruption involving billions, your terms must be very strict. Now that's
one part.
Bail. The second part, the issue of Friday, the issue of Thursday, and so on. These days, the Constitution provides that when you are arrested, you must be released, charged or released within 24 hours. That makes it very difficult on the part of investigators to put a case together and take you to court. It may fall on a Friday.
Or it's being made to fall on a Friday?
Let's assume it is made to fall on a Friday. Your rights are not violated as long as you are presented in court on the following Monday. The old days, in the old constitution and in worse times, people were held in custody for weeks before they were charged. So I think the only inconvenience we're talking about is people who did not expect ever to be charged suddenly are facing the situation of spending a night in a cell. It's a non-issue. It's a non-issue. I don't think the office of the DPP glorifies in doing that for any particular purpose.
Right.
I don't think so. In fact, in the case that you mentioned of the DCJ, they charged her the same afternoon. I mean, it's a question of the availability of the court. Sometimes it's after, it's after 5. It's after 5 on a Friday.
Yeah. One of the challenges, and it has been talked about even by some of these officials, that you have the investigative agencies, whether it's DCI, DPP, EACC, the judiciary, that as you fight corruption within the system, graft is thriving. Where the police every so often are ranked as the most corrupt. So these are the people, getting the evidence firsthand, and some will tamper with it. How do you deal with that so that then it's not self-mutilating?
Good question, Sophia. I'm still waiting for President Kenyatta to demand of the Inspector General a program for ending corruption in the police force. I totally agree with you that as long as that is not tackled as a matter of urgency, there will always be questions asked, even when the work they're doing is good on a particular day, untainted with corruption. But there must be seen to be a situation where corruption in the police force, which is considered the highest in any public institution, is not tackled.
Right.
So I think it's something that must be attended to. And I should say that the office of the DPP is the one that should consider making a recommendation to the president, because as long as there is a perception that the police force are very, very corrupt, it contaminates the work of the good work that the office of the DPP is doing. So I do agree with you.
Yeah, capacity and the lawyers perhaps within, say, the DPP now, in your view, because you'll say the accused will go for many times, I guess, those who can, high-profile senior counsel. Is the DPP capacitated, if I may use that? I don't even think it's English, but the capacity question.
Now, Sophia, when I was DPP, there were barely 45, 50 prosecutors throughout the country. The rest were police prosecutors. It was one of the battles I had with the Office of the President to phase out the police prosecutors so that we could professionalize the service, prosecution service, so that everybody was a lawyer. Today, that battle has been won. There are several hundred, I'm not sure the exact number, 500, 600 public prosecutors all over the country working for the ODPP. So to that extent, capacity, numbers, professionals, they're made, they're fine. On the issue of the high-profile corruption cases being attended to by, by what you might call more junior prosecutors compared to senior counsels, senators, members of parliament on the defense side, I don't see that as a big challenge. When I was doing my first stint as a public prosecutor many, many years ago in the 80s, we had these cases where from time to time the defense would consider having 30, 40 prosecutors, defense counsel as the way to handle the case. And at that time, the Office of the Attorney General did not then consider it necessary to also have 30 prosecutors so that it was, equality of arms. But I take the point you're making, and I hope the DPP is listening, that sometimes he has to consider ensuring that the seniority on the side of the prosecution is equal to the team on the defense side.
Yeah, well, for the DCJ case, we saw the head of prosecutions in DPP, Madam Murgor, lead the team.
An extremely capable prosecutor.
An extremely capable. All right, budgetary cuts in the judiciary. The CJ has decried this. So here we have numerous cases going to the judiciary for prosecution, for hearing and all. And on one hand, you have the judiciary saying these cuts will greatly hamper our work, our ability to expeditiously canvass these issues.
Question?
The question being, do you see this as a revisit? Let's go back to that, because there's the budgetary cut, there's the DCJ being charged, and this is an arm of government. It's not just any other entity.
You heard Bwana Tujus, the CS, a few minutes ago, talking about budgetary shortfalls and deficits. I think there is no running away from the fact that the revenue collection at the moment is challenged. And I have seen every pronouncement on the finance side and on the executive side being to the effect that projects are being scaled down, no new projects are being started.
The budgets for judiciary was significant.
I'm talking about the whole government.
Yes.
So I can see that there is a challenge on the availability of finance. Now let's come to the judiciary. When I was in government, I remember it was up to the department or ministry concerned to fight to maintain the funding that was previously assigned to it or that it required. In this case, it appeared that it didn't happen and there were cuts. As to whether it's a revisit or a situation of cutting back on everybody and they should then make a better case for getting some of the money back, that I can't really comment. But all I can say to the executive is that there are some departments that don't take up too much money, like the judiciary, like the ODPP, and like the police take a lot of money, but those two, and they play a vital role in governance and in making society run.
Okay.
And the executive and parliament should hesitate to take from them.
All right, final question. You have spoken highly of this Director of Public Prosecutions. We had NYS1, we have NYS2, over 20-something charged in the NYS2. Do you believe fruit will be born from this fight? There will be success from this anti-graft campaign?
I go back, in time. I started out the same. I had many cases taken to court. I was removed before they were concluded, and after that, all of them were scattered. Many of them lost, not prosecuted effectively. And therefore, I have a lesson to learn from that. All I can say about the current situation, if the political will remains, there will be fruit. If the political will wanes, it'll end up the same. So if the executive is listening, it all depends on where they place this as a priority. I think in the past, the biggest problem has been the sustenance of political will.
Right.
Yeah, that has been the problem.
All right.
So Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta, our president, should know that it is a challenge to him to make it happen. Mr. Haji, he has a good soldier on the battlefield who, with enough support, I think should be able to pull it off, and we should have a better country. And when we have a better country,
yes,
and we don't lose as much, then we'll have enough money to give back to the judiciary and all the departments
and we'll not
that
have
need
to
more
pay
money.
extra taxes like we're seeing in this instance.
And we won't have to pay this VAT on
petroleum.
fuel. Yeah.
Asante sana, Philip Murgor. Thank you for making time for Checkpoint tonight, for sharing your insights with us on prosecution of corruption in the country. And thank you for staying with us and for watching.